ask, obviously, any attendees or anyone watching this in the future, if you do have the means to provide a donation to the Chicago Furniture Bank. They're a 501c3 nonprofit organization here in Chicago. All right. I will go ahead and get started. Again, we only obviously have an hour, so I want to jump into the introductions to kind of give everyone a quick overview of this great panel. I'm really excited to obviously just discuss why I think everyone has joined today and why this is of interest is that, this is so often an under-discussed topic, which is, how can I at the individual level build a career roadmap, so to speak, and identify those different career options that are available to me, but also, how can I start planning today for where I want to be 5 or 10 years from now? And also, where do I want to be? How can I start answering those questions and understanding the options available? So we'll obviously get to that in a moment, but I will start by kind of randomly selecting each of you, and we'll kind of just go around, and I'll start first just to kind of get it started with. But we'll just kind of recite what we put together in these profiles that we'll send to everyone at the end of the webinar, along with an actual recording of this. So you can kind of understand a little bit more about the journeys that we've taken in our own careers. Because again, I don't think a resume or a LinkedIn profile does it justice in terms of answering some of these questions that I just mentioned. So I will get started. My name is Andrew Thrasher. Today, I am working as a law firm consultant. I work with immigration firms to kind of help standardize their processes, understand digital workflows, and start making sense of some of those operational decisions at the kind of strategic level. I got started as a legal assistant in immigration and had the opportunity, after working in business immigration, to work at a tech startup where I learned a lot about kind of that melding of the technical design, that user-friendly, experience type mindset mixed with that legal background, and how can we make this work for a legal workflow, which led me to where I am today. I will start just going from my own screen. I'll start with Sarah up in the top left, and go ahead.
Hi, I am Sarah Ochoa. I'm Executive Director at Jascott Law. My firm is in Baltimore, Maryland, and we focus on removal defense as well as humanitarian cases. At the firm, I work day-to-day in operations from working with the intake team, scheduling consults, helping them with follow-ups to bring in that new business. I also work with administrative team for calendaring purposes, and I work closely with the legal team to figure out what work needs to be done, what can be done, and making sure that it is done. My team and I also make sure that we have the funds available from the client to be able to do so. I started my immigration career in this exact firm 5 years ago. I started as an intake person, plus with a little bit of additional community outreach and marketing at that point in time. Over the years, I have also held positions as being an intake supervisor, an office manager, as well as operations director. The big difference between being operations director and what I do now is that I really wasn't too involved with the legal team and assignments and bills. And that was something that I've been able to move into over the last year, actually.
That's Sarah. I will hand it off to Magali now.
Nice. Yeah, so my name is Magali Burciaga. I'm currently an associate recruiter with Mindspring Partners. We're located in downtown Chicago. It's a fairly small agency, about 12 of us right now. My main focus is connecting and speaking with candidates for any legal staffing operation roles or any legal staffing in general, also attorneys. And my career actually started as a legal assistant, also in immigration. But as you can see in my little bio, I did start off as a community organizer here in Chicago as well with Reclaim Chicago. But ideally, I obviously really loved the mission, loved everything that people were standing for, but nothing really stood out to me personally. So once I started to speak more people on the south side of Chicago, they talked a lot about immigration, and something that lacked in that community was feeling represented in the legal field, feeling that the people really didn't care about their stories. There was more of like a transactional thing. So once I heard that, I was like, ooh, maybe I should do a legal assistant. Maybe I should help in immigration. So thanks to my cousin Maggie, who was already working in that field, she got me in. After being there for a bit, I really was interested in law. So I wanted to test different waters and ended up in personal injury, where I was a paralegal. Realized that I think my passion was more in immigration. So went straight back to immigration law. After being there for a while, again, curiosity just gets the best of me. And so I was like, I wonder what else is out there, and ended up in recruiting, which ultimately has led me to a position where I can now see the career trajectory outside of being a legal assistant. So I'm really thankful for that.
Holly, I will now call on Kelsey. I feel like I'm like the instructor calling on each person.
Well, let's see. I'm Kelsey Baker. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I will keep mine pretty short because it's probably not as varied or as interesting as some of my co-panelists. But I started out as a paralegal at an immigration law firm. And then I paralegaled my way all the way through law school until I became an immigration attorney. I've been licensed and practicing since 2018, and I had worked at a small boutique firm, and then I moved to big law doing big corporate immigration stuff. And then after sort of taking that, we'll call it maybe a traditional, paralegal kind of path, and then becoming the attorney, I had just decided that rather than work in firms, I would rather work with firms. And so now I'm doing a lot more consulting work, as well as just working as an attorney from the outside.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, Kelsey. And Ben.
Cool. Yeah, my name is Ben Merrill. I am seated in San Diego, California, and I work for Banyan Immigration, which is based up in the Bay Area of California. We're a tech-oriented boutique startup law firm. I entered the immigration arena a bit non-traditionally. I quit grad school and realized I could write and wanted to do something. And so I was able to get my foot in the door there, crushed NIVs for a year or so before leaving that first boutique firm and then going to like a legal tech company. So, similar to Andrew, worked in like the higher level or greater volume tech oriented startup visas, that sort of thing, and then found my sweet spot back in the middle. I worked with my firm's founder, actually, along with one of his clients, on a book that was intended to demystify sort of like different immigration trajectories, specifically for immigrant entrepreneurs. And so that was sort of my that tickled my intellectual curiosities, doing more than just pushing LCAs. But from there, I was able to sort of land in this role where my title is Client Services and Operations Manager, and I cover, our technical stack. I handle implementation of, system and process changes, as well as then, sort of just holding administratively, the glue of our firm together. So onboarding, offboarding, all of that stuff.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, each of you, for kind of giving that brief overview. I know, obviously, Kelsey, to call you out there, I know you said you're not as varied or interesting of a background, but I think one of the highlights of having this panel, and thank you all for joining, is how varied of a background we all have and how many overlapping, I should say, skill sets, both in the legal field, some of those more common, skill sets that are identified as both a paralegal or an attorney, but also some of those more operational, sales type skill sets, as well as those business side skill sets that are often missing in immigration law. So really excited to kind of dig into some of these questions a little bit and, kind of discuss some of what that looks like. Now I'll start by, obviously, again, discussing how we all ended up here today and, where our paths have kind of, looked at these different roles that are not traditional. And apologies for my dog barking. He had to make his appearance. Where have you each, and I'll kind of pick on Magali to start, having worked with Magali, previously at a law firm environment, as a legal assistant who is exploring a career path, what type of advice would you have now working in the legal recruitment and staffing field that you didn't know when you were a legal assistant? What trends are you seeing, and what areas would you advise a younger, early career immigration professional to focus making the most out of their profile. And
Yeah, so something that I've really noticed, so it really depends on the type of clients that we're working with. So when I am working with larger law firms, they are ideally looking for someone that comes from a similar type of either company size, law firm size, just because of the volume of work that they're doing. They want to be sure that this person, if they do jump into this role, it's not something like that they can't control just because they haven't been on that volume of work that they're doing. But something that really sticks out is computer skills. So jumping into Word, Excel, Adobe. I know Canva is something that we spoke about briefly, but a lot of these law firms sometimes do these sort of assessments that have to do with a lot of reading assessments or Excel assessments. So if you are looking to jump into big law, sometimes those are really big things to take in. I know there's sometimes people take those classes, take any type of certification. Those are very huge. Also, maybe internships as well. Any type of internship that deals with client intake, being on the phone, taking any calls, any like administrative type role is also very helpful just because they want someone who is very well communicative. So someone that's speaking to someone on a daily basis. You are speaking to people on different levels and as far as like directors, associates, things like that. So they want to make sure that you're comfortable speaking to these people. So that's definitely one of the biggest factors that I've seen myself. And also it sounds kind of like it does, making sure that your resume and your LinkedIn look exactly alike. Sometimes people just put like their positions and sometimes they put the bullet points on there. Sometimes the bullet points are super helpful, especially for recruiters. Just because law firms, there's things like called practice assistant, legal assistant, admin assistant. Sometimes they're all the same, sometimes they're not. But if by pulling those little bullet points, you kind of give us an overview of what your role looks like. And maybe some of the things that you're currently doing in that role will apply to the other. So it makes it a little bit easier for us to reach out to you, makes it easier to network too, just because we'll also see like, oh, hey, like this role has this similar thing that you'll be doing, or this is actually a step up of what you're doing, things like that. So that's really helpful too. And also adaptability, I would say. Being able to show that you can kind of pick things up on a whim, expressing that on your resume. I think in immigration in particular, I took my research skills not very seriously. So I used to think like me going and looking up what 245I means is not a big deal. Me looking at what the sunset date is not a big deal. Those are all things that you're doing on your own on the side that proves that you're willing to kind of go outside of constantly being like, oh, let me go to an attorney. What does an attorney think? Like you're also taking the initiative yourself to do the research and they can see that you're able to apply those skills into your new role that you're trying to jump into. So I would think those are kind of like the top ones I would give.
No, that makes sense. And I think, Kelsey, here from your perspective, having both worked in, smaller law firm environments as well as big law, going off of Magali's point in terms of some of those skill sets that are most in demand, but also how to show that off. Is there anything, having taken the path that you've taken to where you're at now, that you wish you knew as a paralegal, looking at law school as one option across, many, and what would you have passed along to previous version of you in what you've learned?
Yeah, so in terms of the skills, I think that there's a lot of skills that are transferable from being a paralegal to being an attorney, right? Adaptability, flexibility, organizational skills, good communication skills, everything that was just said. I think that needs to be, maybe even more so as an attorney. And so I think that in terms of some of those just good work skills that they will transfer. I think on a, we'll say like more philosophical side, maybe something that I wished I had considered before making the jump from paralegal to law school was really considering if there were other options for me, right? I think like as a paralegal, I sort of thought like, this is the track, this is what you do. You don't want to be a paralegal anymore. And so I would rather be the one who's reading over those petitions rather than just assembling cases. And I wish that I knew then that there are a lot more options than just going to law school. I don't regret going to law school, but at the time it sort of felt like it's be a paralegal forever and deal with the potential ceilings that you might hit doing that in terms of your career progression, or you go to law school. So that's why I went. And so it would have been cool to feel like I had a lot more opportunities to explore where I could apply those skill sets, because I was a great paralegal. And so I thought that meant, therefore, I need to be a good attorney in order to advance my career. And, seeing all of my wonderful co-panelists, and this is great evidence that that's not true. You don't necessarily need to go to law school. I think it's a good option for people who want to take on that particular role. But it isn't for everybody, and it doesn't have to be for everybody. And so that's one thing that I will say, like, on the other side of things, is that, like, there are other options. And on a practical perspective as well, I wish financial considerations were talked about a little bit more. To go to law school is a serious financial commitment, unless you're lucky enough to get a full ride, which even going to a state school is extremely rare. Um, you're taking on a lot of debt in order to make that type of commitment to get that degree. And I think people have a false understanding that if you're an attorney, you're just going to make a ton of money. Now, that's true if you're going to a big law firm. You will make bank even starting out. But unless you are getting into one of these top law firms that are going to grind you into the dust, and they're really, really hard to get into, you're not going to be making $200,000 a year. I think the average national salary for attorneys, which would include immigration attorneys as well, is about $80,000. And so that's just something to consider when you're looking into your career options. It's not quite the same as a medical field where you're automatically going to be making an insane amount of money when you get out of grad school. So if you are interested in immigration law, which is not necessarily a field that pays like litigation, like financial, like banking, right? So that's something to consider. If you're interested in the work, just really consider if it's worth making that type of financial commitment and investment in yourself, especially if you're like, I don't want to do big law. I don't want to do, big corporate immigration. Now, that being said, I am so glad that there are immigration attorneys across all areas of law who are helping individuals, including doing the really hard humanitarian work. I mean, like, I really commend those people, but think about it, right? Like, do you need to commit yourself? Are you ready, we'll say, to commit 6 figures plus into debt to be able to do asylum work? Now, some people can. That's amazing. Not everybody can, though. So that's just something to consider.
Apologies again for the dog. Every time my voice, starts speaking. Yeah, Ben, in terms of your background, being very similar to me, working as a legal assistant, paralegal in immigration, ending up on the tech side, to go off of kind of Kelsey's point of understanding some of those options available to you, what led you to, end up in tech, and what has that ended up helping you with kind of ending up using a lot of that experience, at least in my own experience in a similar role? How has that helped to kind of apply that skill set in the law firm setting, working on that operational side of an immigrant?
Yeah, so it's actually really funny. What it took for me to go from boutique to tech was watching a firm that was not equipped, operationally speaking, to go through like systems overhaul and implementation. They, had been operating on the same CRM for over 20 years. And as like the younger paralegal who demonstrated like a knack for systematization, I was like the templates guy. I was the person who, really just by virtue of, my sort of experience in a program management role, sort of could see this holistically. And I saw very quickly that it wasn't going to go super far without the enablement or buy-in from the firm that I was at. And so I had applied for an implementation specialist role. And what happened was like that fell through and they bumped me up to an immigration specialist on the tech side. And so it was just more of that. And they were working on a proprietary platform. I used to work for LegalPad, which has been since acquired by Deal. And so their big thing was creating an onboarding and like case assembly platform for extraordinary ability petitions, right? And so it was sort of that eye for lack of a better term, efficiency, as well as then, thinking about how like different stakeholders get tied into these different initiatives that really brought me to wanting to be in a more tech forward space. And then obviously, then you get in there and, it's company culture, it's understanding the scale. I think Magali, you brought up a really good point about, being equipped for scale and volume. And that's where it's like, okay, this is great if you have a product and you have like a vision for your product or your platform. Does the software mean that you can effectively work with it in the way it's intended? And being able to sit back and ask those questions is what sort of brought me back into boutique from tech, whereas no longer, high striving, high volume, big promises. If we'll be frank, and going back into more of like the higher touch, more transparent practice, but seeing both ends of that and seeing, how the grass isn't always greener, but how you can certainly like gain that perspective. It was so valuable in terms of how I developed my soft skills, I would say.
Yeah.
There's obviously, you get the working skills, right? By doing the work, but it was also, and what I would really like to underscore with that question is, just the emotional quotient that comes into the work that we do, and the ability to like not only execute, but relate. Especially in these different contexts where expectations can be so vast and disparate, but then bringing it back to like what we're here to do and how we can serve those that we're working for.
It's a great point. And I think, one of the issues that I've seen, at least in my career, with law firms that have struggled with that, making their services user friendly and connecting and, having that empathetic service quality to, all the work you're doing, it's not for a lack of effort. Obviously, as Kelsey mentioned, you're not really working in immigration to make $1 billion. No one's coming out of here working, feeling like they're, doing this strictly for any type of, financial benefit in many ways. And especially on the legal assistant and paralegal side, I know Ayla has pointed to some survey data where the average legal assistant is making less than $40,000. And those are obviously issues that, lead to some of these more cyclical issues around, for instance, affording law school. How can we, better accommodate and use some of this incredible talent that we have across the immigration ecosystem? All of these paralegals, assistants, receptionists, and billing people who have all of these really kind of nice mix of soft and hard skills that are in demand at these law firms. How can we enable that, collective action to make it more feasible, both for someone to afford law school, but also how can we make it feasible for roles like Sarah, you're, taking on a role as executive director as a non-attorney at a law firm, obviously is a fairly rare, circumstance in 2024. How does, your background and how have you used your experience on the business side to kind of help a law firm, in this case, Jascott Law, better connect with their clients as a attorney, non-legal professional, so to speak? And how does that experience help you connect and work, better with your clients?
So my professional background before coming to the firm was in sales and sales management. And one of the ways that I was able to reach out to more people and help our firm, really be able to connect on, a deeper level with our clients. Well, number one, I have my cultural background is in line with our demographic of people. So I kind of had that coming in. But I was able to come in and kind of just implement some basic kind of sales 101 structures, some follow-ups, culturally speaking, you kind of know how often you should follow up with one type of client or prospective client as opposed to another. I'll give you a perfect and where you're going to reach them at. And that has some marketing involved in it as well. But I'll say, to give you a perfect example, my firm very rarely emails our clients. Our clients, in many cases, don't have email. We do also have a lot of clients who are, may have limited literacy or they may be indigenous and not speak Spanish or, another language that our staff is going to be able to communicate with them in. So by implementing some culturally sensitive sales structure, follow up, hey, just soft call, hey, just how was your consult? Do you have any questions? We've been able to capture a lot more, bring a lot more people in. And what you end up seeing happening, people, when they're migrating, they tend to follow a migration pattern. So they're going to move where a community back home, where members of that community have come to. So what you end up seeing is, hey, these people are great. They're all Spanish speaking, and they were, really soft. They were really nice. Everyone's always very pleasant when you come into the office. They make sure that you understand what's going on. And then you start that kind of word of mouth pipeline, and it has been tremendous for us.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, you hit on such an important part, and why I think this comes back to, identifying these alternative career roadmap, so to speak, is so often in a law firm environment, we can benefit from just better connections to our clients, and understanding that sometimes does, maybe this is a hot take, so to speak, but it kind of necessitates not being an attorney in some ways. And not to say that an attorney can't do that, but it's removing yourself from that legal work at times to understand something like that, where, my clients are not really receptive to email. How can we make this work for them? Whereas Ben, on the other hand, working in Silicon Valley and working with, a very different client base in some ways, you obviously have to align your operations, your workflows to that client base, and understand how to, connect. And I think it's a really interesting area of boutique law that we've all experienced. And so I guess, this one's more for anyone. I'll let you all kind of jump in as if you want, but in terms of some of those skill sets, broader speaking skill sets, so to speak, like marketing, or just using, Canva for design, and helping with some of the marketing efforts at a law firm. What are some of the skills, or more, hard skills, that you've seen help both in your own experience, but also just, in working and networking with other individuals, that have helped kind of highlight, okay, maybe my law firm is not the best at this today, but here's how I can help. Here's how I can help kind of, connect with our clients a little bit better. Are there any skills that stand out to you that are often missing in a law firm?
Well, I'll go ahead and go back to implementation of sales process. When a lot of people in the law hear the term sales, it's kind of like, ew, people shy away from it. They don't care for it. They don't see its value. But it's important to recognize that if your firm is charging for a consultation, the intake people, consult schedulers, appointment setters, what have you, smaller firms, it might even be a paralegal who's setting those consults. If they're charging for it, that's a sale. You're charging someone for a service, right? So it's important to implement these sales structures, starting with learning where your business or potential business is coming from, learning how long it takes from their initial point of contact to get them in the door, and then following through, creating follow-up structures so that you don't lose those people. They might not, especially in, our type of immigration law, financial preparedness is a big hurdle for us. So if someone gives us a call and they don't have the money for the consultation at this point in time, and we don't keep in touch with them, they may not come back to us when they are ready. They might find someone else. So it's kind of like, for no reason, it's not personal. It's out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
Creating those processes to get in front of people, stay in front of them, and then moving them along through the funnel to realization of the contracted work is all part of what is traditional sales. I think that, sales gets a bad rap. You kind of think about that, the car salesman that's trying to sell you that 30-year-old car with, a million miles on it. But there, it isn't always that way. And there are definitely, sales structures that are not meant to be built in a negative, for negative or for shady purposes. It's really just to make sure that, we believe in our firm, right? And our attorneys and the work that they do. So we want to stay in front of you so that when you're ready, we can help you and help, you get along and realize your American dream.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think, you touch on something that's so often missed in law firms, which is that first touch point with a client is before you have a consultation with them. It's, when they're looking at their website or looking, searching on Google and trying to find the best option for them in their area. And so having skill sets that can help law firms identify how to best connect with their client base and understand some of that, client feedback that they're getting from their current clients. And as you mentioned, building that community base is awesome. And it's obviously a much needed area of skills that, are that obviously all of us are trying to help build and expand on. So, this is another question for all of you if you want to jump in, but in terms of some of these skill sets that you would suggest for someone, let's say an entry level immigration paralegal today, to show off maybe some of their previous experience as someone that came from technical recruitment before ever starting in immigration, what are some of those tangential or adjacent career skills that you can show off both in your resume, but also in that interview stage to really highlight your expertise beyond, that job description, which is often so, I also find it funny that immigration attorneys and law firms sometimes use such detailed qualifications for hiring in a way that they obviously know makes no sense when working on something like a perm application and complain about, having such strict definitions of a role. And yet we also do the same. And I've managed, a team where it's so difficult to hire appropriately based on what you're actually looking for because it doesn't necessarily align with job descriptions. So that all being said, is there any skill sets beyond, sales and marketing, as we've discussed, and operational, workflow based understanding? Are there any other skills that you would suggest for someone that's kind of building up their career today, trying to figure out what their options are, and that you would say universally apply across those options and opportunities?
I'll answer
Loaded
this
question.
one. So I mean, again, I'll go back to communication. I think that's one of the largest skills that you can grow. Something that I've learned a lot in recruiting is just being able to start conversation out of nowhere. There are times where I have to cold call people and it's not the most fun because you're calling people at their jobs. So just creating like a type of enthusiasm, also being super personable, just things like that really help you out. And like, especially in the immigration community, nobody wants to be working with someone that picks up the phone in a like very deaf tone type of like, hello. Like you want to be with someone that you feel really cares about your case, really cares about what's going on, really cares about the firm, what they're standing for. So when you're talking to people, just be very enthusiastic about things, I mean, of course, you want to genuinely be enthusiastic in your role, but just showing that also in your voice and your personality. Same thing when like, even like, let's say if you're going for an interview in a role, if you're going into something and it's not something you're ideally fond about, people can see that. People can see it. People can feel it. So anytime that you're in a role, if you want to be in immigration or even in general, if you want to be in immigration, you want to make sure that you're actually compassionate in that work that you're doing, that you're patient. I actually, back to what Sarah was saying, where there are times where people don't speak the language. I had a similar situation in one of my roles as a legal assistant where I started to get really frustrated with one of my clients because they weren't filling out one of the spreadsheets that we send them or like a questionnaire that we send. I was like, I always call them and they never fill it out or they never send it back. until at some point I kind of figured maybe they might not understand what I'm asking. They might not know the type of information that I want to know. So until I finally gave them a call, and I was like, hey, like I can actually go through the questionnaire with you. Like I can ask you these questions on the phone and we can do it together. They were like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, yes, that actually helps me so much fill it out because like my kids aren't home or I live by myself. Like, I don't know how to fill this out. And it's just like having the compassion, having the ability to communicate, having the ability to just be a helping hand to people, I think are skills that are going to take you a lot further in your career, really going to help you out, especially in the immigration law, I would say.
I think that goes back to, I think, Ben, you were saying earlier that, the emotional intelligence side of any work in knowledge service or knowledge work, but especially in legal services is, again, going the extra mile to understand your client and, what they're looking to achieve in this journey, and understanding how much emotional energy is involved in something like immigration is so important in any role whatsoever in a law firm environment. So now, in jumping a little bit into kind of developing these skill sets strategically in your career, let's say you're in a role right now that you're wanting to explore new options or new opportunities, and you want to start building a new skill set, or start networking and building up that that funnel, so to speak, of your own career opportunities. Is there, or are there any opportunities or specific groups or anything that come to mind that any of you would suggest looking at as you're starting that search, and that have been helpful in your own kind of approach? And it doesn't have to be necessarily a skill set or a specific LinkedIn group, but have there been any communities that you found helpful in your own journey that you would recommend to others that are looking at similar situations?
I would say that if you are working for a law firm, I highly, highly recommend that you go to any of the attorneys and ask them to help you sign up for a paralegal membership with AILA. I adore AILA. I had the pleasure to go to the AILA National Conference in Orlando last year, and I met so many phenomenal people, attorneys and allied legal professionals, and people who have products that, translation companies and tech companies that work, with immigration law firms. And I made so many amazing connections, people that I am in communication with on a regular basis, even today. I highly recommend it. Even the AILA website has a lot of great online courses within the paralegal membership, so that you can get some more case type knowledge, and you get great updates about what's going on in your email every day. I think that AILA is a tremendous resource. Now, if you're not working for a law firm, then you wouldn't be able to sign up, but anybody who is in a firm and has an attorney that is an AILA member, I strongly, strongly recommend go run and ask them right now.
Any other kind of communities, resources that you found helpful in any of your kind of career searches?
Yeah, I think if you can just find a connection point with people, that's a good start. And there are really interesting ways to get creative. I have heard, people get interviewed on a podcast and have reached out to them cold afterwards and just said, look, I really liked what you said, and that meant a lot. And how did you get to where you ended up? What advice would you have for me? And I can't tell you how many connections I have been able to make where that people are glad that you listened to what they said. People are interested in helping others. That's probably why they got interviewed anyway, is because they want to be able to provide advice to people and be helpful to others. And I mean, almost never have I had anybody be anything less than enthusiastic in terms of, yeah, let me actually connect you to this other person, or, hey, let me send you this link to this other organization, or have you heard of this other thing? It can really open up a door. So if you are on LinkedIn and you are reading an article that somebody wrote or an opinion piece that you identify with, send them a message, say that you liked it. That can be enough to open up the door to ways that you did not think you ever could, and also will help build your confidence too, which will also help build your communication skills. It's good practice all the way down.
100%. I love that. I think it's such an important, and it's tough at times, admittedly, as someone that, used to be so intimidated by LinkedIn, for instance, and just networking and reaching out to people has opened up a lot of, the reason we're all connected here and doing this panel is largely due to some of those, less I forget what the proper scientific term is, but those like secondary connections that you have in your network, and they're not necessarily always going to come, new opportunities, that is, from the people that you know best, but it's just from those, I saw this person post on LinkedIn, I started following them, and we had a random conversation. Those opportunities can be great to kind of take that captaincy as an immigration professional, or just as any professional, and start building that web of, networking opportunities that you can fall back on, as you go through your career. I think that's great advice.
Yeah,
And
to build up that a little bit, sorry.
no, you're great.
So again, now that I'm a recruiter and I use LinkedIn a lot, like more often, you could go, let's say if you're interested in a particular firm, if you're like you can do your research online, see what you like, you can go to their LinkedIn page, go to the people that are working there, and go to the Chicagoland area, wherever you're located, and just scroll through there and see the different titles people have. You can just click on their profiles, see whatever they did in their background to get there, and even just connecting with them on LinkedIn and sending a message saying, hey, I am super curious how you got this role here. Like, what did you have to do? Anything, like, just people really love to hear that you like their background or that you really like their career. So that's a really good way to connect with someone and see. Sometimes they may be like, oh my God, like we actually have a position open. Or if you see a role, of course, apply to it. That's the first thing to do. But sometimes they have like the hiring person on there as well. So reaching out to them and saying, hey, I just recently applied to this position. I'm super interested. Here's how my skill set would apply. Love to hear back. Sometimes just even doing that, if they don't respond to you, they're going to remember like, hey, this person actually also took the time to message me personally and tell me they're interested. So I think those are really good ways to use LinkedIn. I know a lot of people don't use it. And the reason I know that is because I message a lot of people on LinkedIn, and they'll respond like 5 days later being like, oh, so sorry, I never checked LinkedIn. I was like, yeah, I didn't either for a while. But I think LinkedIn is something that people should definitely use to network. And that's how you can find different roles at different firms and what things are outside of immigration law.
I love that. I think that's a great opportunity for using LinkedIn to kind of realize what else is out there, which again is such a common issue in the legal field is, just it can be really intimidating whether you're an associate attorney at a firm that you've been at for 4 or 5 years and wondering what's next, or a paralegal that, has a few years of experience, you're debating law school, or a tech, startup like Ben and I, where that is, making those decisions can really start with identifying and kind of building some of those networking opportunities on LinkedIn and really showcasing. And, I think my leading into a question that I have, from there, how can you kind of help develop mentorships, both in your existing organization, whether you're, a law firm paralegal looking to learn a little bit more, develop a new, understanding of a case type you've never learned. Are there areas that you would suggest individuals kind of take on a little bit of captaincy and kind of identify where they want to learn, and kind of strategically develop their career or skill set in an opportunity, to use those mentorship opportunities to develop that? Do you see any value in, or have you experienced any opportunities to kind of work with a mentor, either at a different firm or in a different organization, that is able to kind of give you an idea of, okay, I've gone through a similar experience, I've gone down a similar career roadmap, and I can help you understand your options?
Yeah, I can speak to that. As we all may or may not know, the immigration law community is a very tight-knit one, especially when it comes to professionals and who knows who or who goes where. I was fortunate enough to, find folks who had worked at my prior firm and reach out in that way as like, hey, I'm here, and like, oh, how's so-and-so? Again, like nice, warm connection. And then, I mean, even just from that bridge building, I've been able to, get some soft mentoring and yeah, again, see different career paths through just engaging. I was obviously looking for, a change, and that, who better to like speak with than folks who have already been in your shoes at that point in time. And I spoke with folks who continued down the traditional track. I spoke with some folks who went in completely different directions with their careers, again, and I think it's super valid to say, we're on a panel to talk about, immigration law and all of that, but there's so many skills that you cultivate in this arena that you can like then transfer out as an administrator, as a project or manager or coordinator, as an operator. And so just even having those opportunities to, tap someone who either worked at your firm when you were there, or, when I was at a really big tech company, I was able to chat with other folks. There were 5 or 6 of us in the San Diego area. I'm like, what do you do? And even, completely unrelated, like, talking to a marketing professional or an accountant and just seeing, how did you know what you wanted to do? In this particular context, it helped me learn a lot more about myself. Obviously, I'm not going to go into accounting, but just being able to like have that shared common ground,
Yeah.
and then sort of building off of the shared culture, building off of the shared experience. I think that really helps in terms of cultivating a mentorship relationship.
That makes sense.
And I'll jump in and say that, at least in my experience, one of the most important parts of a really solid, good, potentially even lifelong mentorship is to have a values alignment with that person. I think a lot of organizations or law firms or schools or whatever can just assign you in sort of like a big brother, big sister kind of way. And that is not going to work out most of the time. Because I think you need to have someone that you can look up to, not just in terms of maybe the jobs that they've had or the things that they've accomplished, but what their life looks like and the things that they value. Because if you aren't in sync with the values of someone that you're seeking to have a mentorship relation with, you're not going to be happy even if you've made the exact same choices that they did, even if they can help you get to exactly where they are. You want to make sure that you are connecting in terms of the things that you value and the way that you want your life and your career to look. And if you can identify someone and say, I want that person's life, they have the things that I want, the accomplishments I want, or the work-life balance I want, or they travel in the way that I want, those are the people to seek out to have a really good mentorship relationship with.
It's a great point. And I think that's, so under discussed in the legal field is how, whether or not you want to call it work-life balance or some other terminology, it's often a struggle. And so how can we help others, identify the type of career that they're looking for? And also how can we, take each mentorship advice or, every piece of advice we get from a potential mentor with a grain of salt and understand how, maybe we want slightly different career path than them, and how can we adjust accordingly. Now, in terms of, identifying some of those alternative career paths, Magali, I'll hand it to you in terms of, as someone that was working in immigration, decided to kind of jump into, I think, a very, very highly transferable skill set in working in recruitment. And I'm biased having worked as a technical recruiter previously, but where do you see kind of the future of the legal profession? Where would you recommend, not in skill sets, but in terms of, outlook on what you want out of a legal professional career for an entry level immigration paralegal, for instance? What type of advice or what type of, outlook would you recommend for someone based on what you're seeing market trends wise from the recruitment side? What would you like to know as an entry level paralegal? So, for instance.
I think going into an entry level immigration legal assistant role, really see where you find most interest. Are you really into the law, or are you really into sort of supporting that attorney? Again, just because there's that side of either become a legal assistant forever or I'm an attorney. But I think law firms, like the really 2 roles or career paths that have called my attention after being an immigration legal assistant have been, do I want to be the support? Do I want to be someone that's supporting an attorney, looking after all those documents, putting documents together for them? Or do I want to learn the in and outs of a law firm without having to be an attorney? So I think those are two career paths that I've seen a lot of my roles in. So more like administrative roles where it's that practice assistant, learning and developing. So being more of that person looking at what attorneys are doing in their careers. So I think there's this thing called like CLE, so continued legal education. So after attorneys take their exams, then they have to continuously take exams depending on what state they're practicing in. So again, for myself, I wanted to be an attorney at some point. The LSAT very much humbled me. So I decided to not follow that track. But just being able to still have sort of like an attorney type track where I'm following what they have to learn, following their career path without having to take the LSAT and go to law school. That's the type of career, like learning and development would be something that I would recommend people looking into, or that side of learning a law firm and how it operates. Again, the operations side, seeing what goes into making a law firm work, what goes into the work that they're doing, the type of scheduling that they're doing, business, partnerships, things like that, I think are what I'm seeing more in the market. And I feel like that's where a lot of those skills can really transfer into. Again, if you want to be a legal assistant, go into an attorney, follow that track. But if not, there's always the operations side or more the administrative and learning development side. I think would be two of the ones that I would really look into.
Makes sense. And I think that, again, going back to this idea of mentorship, you hit on the need for identifying and answering some of those really tough questions around what am I really looking at this work before you can identify the right for what to get in the bed. And apologies for the rejoining the meeting, but now in terms of other opportunities to kind of start building aside from LinkedIn, is there any other alternative ways to highlight some of these skill sets that we're starting to see, and hopefully we'll start more growth on the smaller and mid-sized law firms to start to appreciate these same, the same skill sets that were in demand in the big law areas? Where can we start, enabling some of that and preparing for this increased demand? And how can you highlight some of those transferable skill sets? Aside from LinkedIn, are there any other alternative options to, start highlighting or start working towards this expectation that firms are going to be looking more for these operational skill sets, especially for a paralegal, hearing all of this, craze around AI and replacing paralegal workforces? And what is there any advice or recommendations or anywhere that you would point to for someone that feels that anxiety around preparing for the future of their work that would help them kind of start planning accordingly now? I know that was kind of an obtuse question, so apologies.
That's actually a really difficult question, just because I don't firmly believe that AI will eventually, take over some people's roles again, because we talked about the emotional intellect that goes into these kind of roles, some things that machines are never going to have. It's a really hard question, actually.
And I don't mean to, sorry, I just point to the generative AI, not as like we can debate for days on with the future of legal tech, and that's obviously a whole different webinar, but more so, in terms of alleviating some of that concern around, we're seeing so many shifts in the marketplace in legal services. How can, as an individual, are there any opportunities to take a little bit more captaincy around, how can I prepare for these shifts accordingly and feel a little bit more safe around, having that safety net behind me career-wise?
Sure. So I think, I work for a very tech-forward firm. The owner of my firm has a legal chatbot as well. It's a separate company. And I think that learning some of those skills, learn to code, learn JavaScript, right? For example, as well as familiarizing yourself with using generative AI, OpenAI, ChatGPT. Try to just include those things a little bit more in your day-to-day life. I really try to, and it takes, for ChatGPT or OpenAI, it takes a little bit of practice to kind of learn how to prompt it. And you might be taken aback and think like, in the time that it takes me to prompt this thing to do what I wanted to do, I could have written this letter myself. But learn and familiarize yourself with those things. I, agree with Magali that I don't think that AI is going to be replacing any jobs in the immigration field, but it is going to be making our jobs a lot less time consuming in the future. I do also believe that there are going to be on site AI related jobs in the immigration field within the next 10 years, let's say, maybe less. Um, don't don't shy away from it. Like, that's the worst thing that you can do, is shy away from a transformative era such as generative AI. Familiarize yourself with it, get comfortable with it, maybe take some small courses or whatnot, and practice using it so that you can maybe include those things on a resume and catch someone's eye.
100%. And I think I'm enabling, the ability to take a quick 2-hour course, which is becoming so common. Obviously, we're seeing, between OpenAI and all of these other AI companies putting together these really intricate courses on their, whether or not it's on their website or just sharing, between partnerships with all of these other organizations in the field. There's so many opportunities, even in your Microsoft 365 account, for instance. If you work at a firm that has, a full MS 365 account, there's a ton of free courses available that, it sounds kind of cheesy at times. Like, is this course really going to get me that next job that I'm looking for? But building that, that development takes time, and it's not going to be that, one little bullet point on your resume that gets you that role. It's going to be kind of working towards it, identifying and kind of where can I build off of my existing skill sets to, I love, obviously, Jared offering, and kind of enabling that even further in your firm, and taking that a step further and allowing employees to kind of figure out these adjacent skill sets and approach them in a more educational way, which I think more firms would stand to benefit from. But I think this has been a great conversation, and we'll kind of wrap it up here. And I know we didn't get to everything, but in terms of what we've kind of touched on here, is that there's a need for more. There's a need for more of these conversations. There's a need for more resources. And so I'm really both grateful for everyone joining here as a panel. This has been a great conversation, and we'll continue this further, and we'll send some follow-up materials just to kind of further these conversations and enable more individuals to realize how actually common these alternative career paths are, because obviously we are all, proof that there's no real templated career path in immigration. And so identifying that and just kind of empowering people to speak about it a little bit more and start finding those opportunities to mentor and, find new opportunities to learn new skill sets is starting with these types of conversations. So thank you, everyone. And we will, again, send out our recordings, and we'll continue doing this further and having some more conversations. Thanks, everyone.